With us now, we have the ranking member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, also with us for this conversation. Staff writer at The Atlantic, Julia Ioffe. I want to talk Facebook. I want to talk internet. And, you know, Adam, you're a great person to talk to. But, Julia, we were talking about Ben Shapiro earlier being one of the more bullied people on social media and Twitter in the 2016 campaign. Seems to me you were right up there.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. So, okay, Julia Ioffe, fresh off an MIT event last night. Thank you for being with us. Okay, well, we'll get back to you in a second.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll get right back to you, Julia. So there are a lot of people. I want to know, why does Twitter allow all the Russian bots to go in and completely shape a debate online? Why does Facebook? Is Facebook coming forward with the information that you need to make sure this doesn't happen again? Is Twitter cooperating? Google, are they cooperating? Is everybody cooperating they need to, in a way they need to make sure that foreign countries, foreign adversaries don't try to impact our elections?
They are cooperating, but there's a lot more information we need. I really don't think we have, by any means, a full picture of what the Russians did on social media. But even what we do know is profoundly disturbing. Just in the last couple of weeks, the public reports about not only the paid advertising the Russians did on Facebook, but the fact that the Russians used organizing tools to try to organize protests, that they had a web page in Texas that was bigger than the Texas Republican Party in terms of its popularity. This, confirms one of the conclusions of the intelligence community from earlier, and that is, separate and apart from their desire to help Donald Trump or hurt Hillary Clinton, they wanted to hurt America. They wanted to play on these internal divisions with the country, aggravate them, grow the divisions wider. And this is why so much of their advertising, their organizing was centered around these divisive issues, these sort of anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim issues designed to inflame the American public.
And Julia, you've talked about it before. You've talked about the strategy, Vladimir Putin's strategy, Russia's strategy. It's actually, even though we don't like it, it's fairly astute. If you can project power by creating a couple of million bots with some basic programming that actually might bend a debate a little bit in one direction or another, that's actually a pretty good use of your resources if you're Russia, right?
Well, there's a reason they call it asymmetric warfare, is that it doesn't take much. This is actually pretty simple to do. It's very cheap. So for very little resources, you get a big bang for your buck. The other thing is, as people smarter than I have pointed out, we've been seeing this since 2014. This is basically Vladimir Putin taking methods that he honed at home, working on against internal opponents, independent journalists, activists, and exporting it first to Europe, then to the U.S. These bots, DDoS attacks, hacks, hack and dumps, we saw that all in Russia over the years. So actually, I've been subjected to the same stuff in Russia, and then I came here and thought, okay, I'm free and clear, and here we are again.
Yeah, well, Adam, let me ask you about whether this is actually what we should focus on the most. Obviously, you've got a job to do, the committees have a job to do, Mueller has a job to do regarding collusion and any obstruction issues and whatever flows from that. But for the long-term good of this constitutional republic, isn't this what we really need to focus on in the long run and make sure we protect ourselves from this in the future?
You're absolutely right. That yes, we need to get to the bottom of whether there was any coordination between the campaign and the Russians, but fundamentally we need to understand what the Russians were doing to try to destroy our country.
Are we aggressively doing that?
We are trying. We are trying, but we have a lot more work to do.
Are Republicans working with you to do that?
Republicans are working with us. We certainly have our differences, and you get to see a lot of those played out in public. But by and large, all patriotic Americans, Democrats and Republicans, need to recognize, and I think many do recognize in Congress as well as outside of Congress, that this was an attack on our country. As Julia was saying, this is very much a KGB playbook kind of attack. So division from within. It's a great asymmetrical weapon because there's always some level of deniability. The Russians can always say it wasn't us, and they're never going to want to show the full proof of how we know that the Russians were doing this.
But Congressman, do the tech companies get that? Does Silicon Valley get that? I don't really, from what I can tell based on covering your investigation and on watching what else they're doing on Capitol Hill, they seem reluctant to testify. They seem reluctant to admit that this was even happening. Are you getting what you need from them? Are they acting in America's national security interest?
You know, we need to get a lot more from the technology companies. I think they were slow to realize how their platforms were being used. And I think we still don't have the complete answers. In part, I think they were slow to realize it because it was a difficult thing to identify. In part, it may be, look, it's against their economic interest to be advertising problems about how a foreign government was exploiting their technology. So there's a natural economic interest.
So what can Congress do to address that? I mean,
well, we need to compel these companies to give us good answers. And what makes this so difficult, frankly, is it's not as if we can simply ask them to send us their data and analyze it ourselves. We need their own expertise. We need their own willingness to devote considerable resources to looking at what happened on their own systems, and we need to be able to rely on the information they provide us.
Julia, it's Donnie Deutsch. You have a great piece in The Atlantic about, we all know that Trump has tried, or did try to build in Russia. And your piece talks about why it didn't happen.
And Donnie, we'll now ask the question, why didn't it happen?
I did.
Well, you just sort of left it hanging out there, man. As far as you didn't ask the question.
I like your jacket, but why didn't it happen?
There you go.
Thank you.
That is a brilliant, insightful question,
Thank you,
which
sir.
Julia will answer now.
Thank you, sir.
So the reason it didn't happen is, first of all, you need a good Russian partner on the ground because it's a very corrupt, the world of Moscow real estate is a very corrupt world. You need a lot of papers and permits and permissions, et cetera, to get a building out of the ground, and you need a good Russian partner with good political connections to do that, which Donald Trump never did. He had guys like Felix Sater running around that was too sketchy even for the Russians. The Russians were like, I don't know, we don't know about this guy. The other thing is that Donald Trump...
If you're too sketchy for the Russians, that should say something about your partnership. But, you know, Julia, at the bottom, what this does reveal, though, really quickly, and then I'll let you do the other thing, but this does reveal, when we're all talking about collusion, and he's in with Putin, he's here, you know, we're finding out that his hapless lawyer is sending emails to a general account, joe@msnbc.com, like Vladimir Putin at like Russia.com. I mean, it seemed like they didn't have any contacts that would suggest collusion.
They certainly bragged about it. That's kind of the problem, is there was a lot of bragging, a lot of building themselves up to be bigger than they were, which, you know, if anybody can smell a con man a mile away, it's the Russians. And they smelled one here. The other thing is that Donald Trump doesn't invest anything in these properties that are developed with his name on it. He just takes money out for his name. You pay him for his name. And the Russians were like, I'm sorry, who are you? What is a Trump? Why are we paying 30% extra for this? This was not a recognizable brand, and especially not they were willing to pay extra for, which is kind of funny.
Congressman, real quick, the conflict in Ukraine has to be the hottest frozen conflict on the planet right now. 10,000 dead, almost 30,000 wounded. John Kerry, former Secretary of State, is in Ukraine this morning. I'm going to summarize something he said by Moscow Times managing editor Oliver Carroll. Russian behavior today stems from Western triumphalism in the 1990s, at a time when Russia needed financial assistance, which it did receive, by the way. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, does that mean that we should not be pursuing lethal aid to Western Ukraine and Kiev?
Well, I think we should be pursuing lethal aid. I think, frankly, we should have been providing defensive arms to Ukraine from the very beginning. We and other countries made a commitment to Ukraine if they gave up their nukes in 1994, which they did. We would help assure their territorial integrity. And I think we have not lived up to that full commitment.
Do you think Russian irredentism today is our fault?
No, I don't. You know, certainly the fact that so many of their neighbors were moving in a Western direction, they were joining NATO, they were joining the European Union, stoked Russian fears. But frankly, these countries get to choose their own destiny. And I think we should support that and have support. I think that was the right decision, notwithstanding the fact that it might raise Russian fears. Every country has the right of its own self-determination. And I think they chose to merge with more forward-leaning economies and be part of a better international system. And I think that was right for them, and I think it was the right approach for us to encourage.
And Julia, really quickly, I'll ask you the question I always ask when you're on. What's the current state of Russian-U.S. relations based on your reporting? What direction are we going in?
Still bad. Still very bad. You know, I have to say this is...
And tomorrow will get worse, yes.
That's right, yeah. So the thing is, we talk about Vladimir Putin as if he's 12 feet tall and he's, you know, this perfect chess-playing strategic genius, and he's just not. He didn't expect Donald Trump to get elected. I guess he was kind of pleased that he got elected, but now his hands are tied. That's the Russian narrative, that Trump's hands are tied, and he can't deliver on what he would like to deliver in terms of the relationship with Russia. So the Russians are really unhappy right now. This has not turned out well for them, and they certainly, I think, celebrated a little too soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia Ioffe. Greatly appreciate it. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you. It's great to have you on set.
It's great to be with you.
Come back. And still ahead on Morning Joe, the Treasury Secretary. You know, he's the guy who decided when there was a total eclipse of the sun, he was going to fly his lovely bride, as I'm sure he said, to the top of Fort Knox, stand on a lot of gold, and watch a total eclipse of the sun.
What was she wearing that day? I heard nice things.
I think Gucci, some Valentino. Anyway, he asked the government for a plane to take him on his honeymoon, and reports that follows, of course, a report about that whole flying the government plane to watch the eclipse in Kentucky, where they keep 140 million ounces of gold. We're going to get his explanation coming up next, and as we go to break,
media, but even what we do know is profoundly disturbing. Just in the last couple of weeks, the public reports about not only the paid advertising the Russians did on Facebook, but the fact that the Russians used organizing tools to try to organize protests, that they had a web page in Texas that was bigger than the Texas Republican Party in terms of its popularity. This, you know, confirms one of the conclusions of the intelligence community from earlier, and that is separate and apart from their design.
Why does Facebook? Is Facebook coming forward with the information that you need to make sure this doesn't happen again? Is Twitter cooperating? Google, are they cooperating? Is everybody cooperating they need to, in a way they need to make sure that foreign countries, foreign adversaries don't try to impact our elections?
They are cooperating, but there's a lot more information we need. I really don't think we have, by any means, a full picture of what the Russians did on social desire to help Donald Trump or hurt Hillary Clinton. They wanted to hurt America. They wanted to play on these internal divisions with the country, aggravate them, grow the divisions wider. And this is why so much of their advertising, their organizing was centered around these divisive issues, these sort of anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim issues designed to inflame the American public.
And Julia, you've talked about it before. You've talked about 16 campaign. Seems to me you were right up there.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. So, okay.
The halcyon days.
Julia Ioffe, fresh off an MIT event last night. Thank you for being with us. Okay, well, we'll get back to you in a second.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll get right back to you, Julia. So, there are a lot of people. I want to know, why does Twitter allow all the Russian bots to go in and completely shape a debate online? With us now, we have the ranking member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, also with us for this conversation. Staff writer at The Atlantic, Julia Ioffe. I want to talk Facebook. I want to talk internet. And, you know, Adam, you're a great person to talk to. But, Julia, we were talking about Ben Shapiro earlier being one of the more bullied people on social media and Twitter in the 2000s.